Hey guys, how's it going? This is Jay once again with another review. And this time I wanted to do a review of the GNOME edition of Manjaro. I've recently done a few videos on Manjaro on my channel, and I wanted to check out a couple of different versions of Manjaro. In that video I did the main XFCE edition and both of the previous videos on Manjaro. So now I also want to take a look at GNOME and KDE as well. And in this video, I'm going to show you the GNOME edition of Manjaro. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. All right, so here I am on the default Manjaro desktop. I do have this display settings open. I'll get into why I opened that in just a moment. But I just want to mention that in this video, it's going to be more of a first impressions video, but it's also going to be that in a combination of a review. This isn't the first time I've used the GNOME edition of Manjaro, so I can't quite call it a first impressions, but it has been quite some time, so I'm sure lots of things have changed. So I definitely wanted to dive in and give this a review, so I'll let you know what I think of it as I go along. So first of all, here I am on the desktop, so you might be wondering, I have the display settings up on my screen. Why is that? So basically, every time I record a review, I have a screen recorder plugged into the laptop that allows it to capture the HDMI, and that's no exception here. But what I noticed is that the colors look kind of off to me, and of course you're probably not going to see this in the video. Maybe you will. I'm not sure how or if this is even going to come through in the video. But basically, the night light feature is on by default, which I think is really weird. For starters, this is not the correct time because I've never set my time zone. So that's normal in a Linux distribution before you set your time zone, that it's not actually going to be correct until you set that. But night light often does go by that, and it does lower the brightness and changes the colors to try to limit eye strain at night to basically make you more relaxed getting closer to bedtime. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. Let's see if this works. And yes, the colors immediately look way more crisp, and I don't know why on earth they would include nightlight on the live media. That seems like very silly to me, especially since no one has had a chance at this point to configure their time zone, because a lot of times it'll go by the time. I think that's interesting, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Basically, when we first log in, what you actually see is this Manjaro Hello, which is really cool because it gives you an option to launch the installer. And it also gives you some links to their chat room, the forum, how to get involved in the project. And I think this is good because it basically emphasizes that they really would like you to be involved. If you find that Manjaro works really well for you, you should donate because that does help them out. The cost of server infrastructure and hosting is not cheap, let me tell you. I know from experience. So without further ado, I'm going to launch the installer. I'm going to get this installed, and then I will go through and show you the rest of the release. So let's check out the installer. It's defaulting to American English, so that works. And it's spinning here, so I'm going to go ahead and let that finish doing whatever it's doing. Okay, so basically it was just complaining that I wasn't connected to the internet, so I guess it was trying to load something. I did connect to the internet, but not fast enough apparently. I'm going to relaunch this installer. Let's try this again. All right, so I'm not sure if you could hear it in the video, but the fan on my laptop is going crazy, which is not normal. So that thing that was spinning even after I connected to the internet, it took about 3 minutes, and it didn't even tell me what it was even doing. The fan was going crazy, and eventually came to this screen right here. So that it hasn't been a very great experience so far in the installer because it's basically it was locked up for several minutes for seemingly no reason. Anyway, enough about that. I'll just leave the default on American English. I'll click Next. It automatically detected my general area, which is actually pretty cool. So I'm glad it did that. It saved me the trouble of doing that. So I'll click Next. And I'll just leave all this as default as well. And what I'm going to do now is erase my disk. I basically want to, just completely wipe out everything. I'm not going to actually use swap in this case. You probably should. It doesn't hurt to have it. But I'm going to be wiping this system as soon as I'm done anyway because this is just a test machine. So I'm not going to bother encrypting either, although that's recommended if you're concerned about the safety of your data. So I'll click Next. And I'll fill out my user info here. I think that's fine. I'll just go ahead and leave that as default, put in my super secret password, and I'll use the same password for the administrator account, which I believe sets up sudo, so I'll click next. And it's just giving me a summary of what it wants to do, and I'll click install. Install now. Alright, so the installation is finished, so I'll go ahead and choose the box to restart. Click Done. We'll get back to the video in just a moment, guys, but before we do, I just wanted to quickly mention my sponsor, Linode. Linode is an awesome provider of cloud Linux servers, and their Cloud Manager dashboard makes it extremely easy to set up your own Linux server in seconds. Whether you like Fedora, Debian, or Ubuntu, or whatever your distribution of choice is, you can have your very own Linux server running your favorite distribution in a geographic location near you, with the latest one just recently introduced in Toronto. So go ahead and check out the link in the description below this video, where you can get $20 in credit towards your own Linux server. So go ahead and check that out, and let's get right back to the video. Alright, so here I am on the default desktop. The installation was successful, and here I am now installed directly on the laptop hard drive. I've already gone over the Manjaro hello, so I'll just go ahead and close this, and I'll just ignore this prompt for the language packs for now. And we can see some of the changes that they've made straight away, where we have the Manjaro branding, and it basically have menu up here at the top. So if I click on it, it's actually an application menu, which you don't normally get with GNOME. GNOME has a completely different system for that. But this might be helpful for people. But it's kind of strange though, because you also have an application menu here on the bottom. This is the Dash-to-Dock panel extension that comes preloaded. And again, that's not something you'll get in standard GNOME. You do have something very similar in Ubuntu though. So we have two application menus. That is very, very strange to me. I don't know why we would need two. But we also have some default applications here on the left, so we can get a look at some of the things that come default. We have Firefox as the default browser, so I'll go ahead and open that. And just out of curiosity, which version are we at? Probably doesn't matter. This is a rolling distribution anyway, but very up to date, so that's really cool. And what version of GNOME do we have? So I'll bring up GNOME files here and just go to About. And we have GNOME 3.30, which is one major version behind. I haven't run updates yet, which I will do shortly, and I'll see if that actually gets to be updated. This is a rolling release, as I mentioned, so even if it's not up to GNOME 3.32 yet, it will be as soon as that's prepared for release. So we can see the default icon theme is a shade of green or some kind of a mint. So I like that. Green is one of my favorite colors anyway, so I like the theme that they put in here. It's more of a flat theme, but it looks really good. So you can see that they did put a lot of polish into this release as well. So then here we have the text editor. This is just your standard text editor. This is gedit that comes with GNOME, so no surprise there. And then of course we have the GNOME terminal. You can see that's also 3.30 as the default terminal emulator. So to me this is kind of sending somewhat of a mixed message though, because Manjaro is an easy to use distribution for average people. It's basically a distribution that someone who wants to use a rolling release can use, but they don't necessarily want to spend time building the system from scratch, but then to have a terminal there is kind of something for more advanced users. So that's somewhat of a mixed message for me, especially since right below that you have your add remove software, which is a graphical way of adding and removing software. So you don't really need the terminal for anything, because you can actually install applications through here. So if I go ahead and click on updates, it says my system is up to date, so perhaps it was updated while I while I ran the installer. That's possible. I'm going to go ahead and close that. We also have Empathy here. This is for instant messaging, so we could go ahead and add accounts if we would like to do that. And let's see if there's anything here. So what kind of account do you have? And it's not letting me do anything. So anyway, I'm not going to get into this in too much detail. It's interesting to find something like that here because instant messaging clients basically are getting more and more useless nowadays as these systems kind of give way to more web-enabled or web-based systems. But for those of you that use that kind of thing, it's here for you as well. And we also have a screenshot tool on the main panel. That's interesting inclusion. I don't know why we need such quick access to that, but I guess that could be very helpful. And it's easily removed, so I could just right-click and remove that one. I'm not going to use that, and so on. So you can easily customize that menu. Up here in the top right, you have your normal icon. So you have your battery, volume, wireless icon in the top right like you normally would have. And then here I have some settings. So I'll go ahead and click on kernels. I think that's a good thing to go over here. So right now we have a list of several different kernels that we can install. Right now, what one are we running? We're running 4.19, so we're very current. But we can also install Linux 5.0. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Why not? This will be the first time I've actually installed kernel 5 on anything. So this is kind of like a special occasion, I guess. So it's installing a kernel, and this is one of the things that I love most about Manjaro. So you can track multiple kernel releases, which is really important because you should, at minimum, have a few different kernels. So if for whatever reason you run your updates and then maybe your current kernel just doesn't boot or has a problem, it rarely ever happens. But it's really good to have another kernel in the system just in case you run into a problem, you have like a backup. So I'm going to go ahead and let kernel 5 install. So it's actually downloading that one and it's installing it now. So that's just to show you that you can actually do that. I don't need Firefox open. You guys know what a web browser looks like. And from there, I can go to the menu here. We could take a look at some of the other applications. So we have your standard utilities here. We have HP Device Manager, which means if you have a supported HP printer, it should work out of the box, so that's great. We have GNOME Tweaks installed by default. I'm just going to open a couple applications here, actually. So that was GNOME Tweaks, and then we have GNOME Weather. So what's the weather like for me? So I'm just going to type Detroit. You see how miserable it is here. It's 36 degrees and it's overcast. Big surprise. Well, that's Michigan for you. Anyway, that's cool. We have a weather app installed by default. GNOME Tweaks installed, so we can see some of the extensions that they include. So they include the Arc menu, which I assume is this guy up here in the top left corner. So let's go ahead and turn it off. And we see it returns back to normal GNOME activities. So I was right, that is the Arc menu. So I'll just turn that back on. Dash to dock, which is this little panel right here. So desktop icons aren't here by default. Let's see what happens when I turn that on. And sure enough, we get desktop icons. So now we have support for that, whereas we didn't have that before. GS Connect allows you to basically connect to your phone, which is great. I don't have a compatible phone, but that's cool to see that's there. And most of these extensions are turned off, but you could freely turn them on if you want. And there's just a handful of these that are on. So user themes are enabled by default as well. And we have some other tweaks, but I'm going to go ahead and close that. We see that our kernel is installed, so I'm going to go ahead and close this and quit. And I'm going to reboot the machine and try to run kernel 5. I will be right back. All right, so I rebooted, and of course our little Manjaro Hello screen came back up here. So are we running kernel 5? Moment of truth. And we are. We're running kernel 5. So this is a special occasion, the first time I have ever ran kernel 5. Literally, the very first time. So that's really cool that Manjaro makes it so easy for me to have the latest kernel. That's a feature that I really do love about this distribution. All right, moving on from there, what else do we have? Let's go ahead and open up the applications. I'll just click on all. So this is the GNOME application launcher that I got from the bottom left corner, the second of the 2 application launchers. You can see some of the applications that we have here by default. So, we have Cheese for webcam. So, shows me talking right there, which is pretty cool. There might be a little bit of a delay in my voice. No, it's common. But anyway, you can see the webcam works. It's not the greatest webcam. We have a document viewer. We have all kinds of different things here that I mentioned already. So LibreOffice, are we at the latest version? Which one are they on? This is an application I love. We're on 6.1. So this is an application I love because all my books are written with LibreOffice. So, it's definitely capable word processor if I was able to write 4 books with it, so definitely appreciate that being included, especially the fact that it's a new version. Hex Chat for IRC is installed by default. We have the Maps application, which that icon looks suspiciously stolen from Google, which I assume that's just GNOME Maps. And am I right? I am. That's GNOME Maps. So I don't know why they're using the Android or the Google Maps icon, but I guess whatever, doesn't matter. Maybe it just looks very obvious. So we have Microsoft Office and Microsoft Word, for example. These are just web containers, so to speak, that go to the online version. So if you have an account, which I do not, I can't test this, I don't have a Microsoft account, but if I did, I should be able, I assume, to log in and use the online versions of Word. Not something that I would ever benefit from. I'm not a Microsoft user. However, I'm sure there's plenty of you out there that would benefit from that. So it's looking like they thought of everything. So if I click on Steam, I believe that's just an installer. So go ahead and see what else we have here. Time Shift. So, oops, lost my place. Time Shift. Go ahead and type in my password. I'm glad to see Time Shift is included. And since I brought up Steam, it's installing in the background, which is great because I can get my games installed. And I've gone over Time Shift in another video. Basically allows you to create little snapshots that you can restore your system from. So that's really cool to have that. I'm just going to go ahead and close it. I have a whole video about that if you actually would like to use it. Moving on from there, we have videos. I already went over tweaks. And we have a system monitor, so we can see basically how is my system handling this release right here. So I'll go to resources. This is an older laptop. It's a quad core, as you can see. Actually, it's dual core with hyper-threading, and I have Steam running, so I'll go ahead and give that a minute to finish what it's doing. It's only using about 1.2 gigabytes here, which is actually more than GNOME generally uses. In my experience, it actually uses about half that for me on Ubuntu when idle. We do have these extra extensions here that could be accounting for that, but I highly doubt it's responsible for 1.2 gigabytes. I'm not sure exactly what's running, so if I go to processes, I don't actually see a whole lot that's running here as far as CPU. So if I sort by memory, it's actually, it doesn't seem to be one thing that's causing it. So that's high memory usage. I don't know why, but it is what it is. So it's actually running decently fast. It's very responsive to me. So I think it is running fine. The system, maybe there's some kind of indexing or something, I/O going on in the background. It's probably nothing to be concerned about, but it is a little higher than I would have liked to see. So overall, I think that the GNOME edition of Manjaro is pretty good. I'm a fan of GNOME myself. It is what I use on pretty much every machine. So I might give this a spin on one of my machines that I use for actual work and just kind of see how it does and see how it lives up to its reputation. So I had a few problems with the installer. Maybe it's the machine, I don't really know. I can't definitively say if there actually was a problem with the installer. Manjaro's installers have never given me a problem in the past, so that was kind of weird. So I'm just going to go ahead and let that go. And then overall, I think my only complaint with Manjaro, and this is a personal complaint, is that they add too much to the GNOME release. They change it so much that it doesn't look or feel like actual GNOME. And I don't really know how I feel about it. I think it's good that they're going the extra mile and they're adding additional features to GNOME, and I think a lot of people will appreciate that. But it's also giving people a look at GNOME that's just not authentic. It's just not authentic GNOME. It is GNOME, but it's just GNOME plus a bunch of other stuff in much the same way as some Android phones add so much to their implementation of the Android OS that you barely recognize it. And that's kind of the feeling I get here. So if I was going to run this full time, I would find myself removing a lot of extensions. I mean, only a few of them are enabled. I'd be disabling those. I'd be removing the Microsoft packages, Empathy, a number of other things that are installed by default I would probably need to remove, because I wish there's a way in the installer to just say, Manjaro, no thank you. I really would like to have a vanilla GNOME experience without all the add-ons. I know I'm in the minority here, and most people will actually prefer what Manjaro has done. So I'm not holding this personal opinion against the distribution at all. It's just me personally, I prefer vanilla GNOME without extensions. But many of you, maybe you'll like it, and I do recommend that you give it a try. It is very stable from what I've seen so far, and I do like the theme and the polish that they put into it, so I think that they're doing a pretty good job. And if you're looking for a rolling distribution, and you want something GNOME-based rather than the default XFCE, I think you could do a lot worse than Manjaro. I think it's a solid release. So definitely check it out. Let me know in the show notes below what you guys think. I look forward to reading your comments. And I'm going to go ahead and start working on my review of the KDE edition of Manjaro right now, which will be uploaded sometime after this one is done editing. So I'll see you there. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you want to help me out, go ahead and check out the links in the description below, and there you'll find a link to purchase my latest book, Mastering Ubuntu Server, 2nd edition. You'll also find a link to my Patreon page, as well as my Amazon store, which includes a listing of Linux-compatible hardware that I've tested personally. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.